Let both sides seek to invoke the wonders of science instead of its terrors. Together, let us explore the stars, conquer the deserts, eradicate disease, tap the ocean depths, and encourage the arts and commerce. Let both sides unite to ease in all corners of the earth the command of Isaiah to undo the heavy burden and let the oppressed go free.
Welcome to this week's United Front Radio. I'm Daniela Walls, chair of the Tax Wall Street Party, with Kyle McCarthy, founding member of the United Front Against Austerity. Today we are going to take a look at the September 21st Climate March in New York City. We will explore the role of man in the universe and what is the state of mankind at this present moment. Who has power over us? Because if somebody doesn't have power over us, then it's a hobby to define them.
It wouldn't be a matter of economic survival where you're and I think maybe this is what like Occupy never strove to figure out. It's just kind of like, yeah, Wall Street, man, the 1%.
Or capitalism.
Leaving it vague allows you to twist it in those different ways, and people who want political and economic power at the expense of the power of other people. Are they campaigning for free trade agreements?
The Koch brothers are working overtime to get people into office, these midterm elections. There's that Madison Project, 14 and 14, and what happened in Kansas with Senator Brownback. Then we have them trickle down into the elections of Dave Brat and Ben Sasse and all these other guys, and Rand Paul, that whole Senate Conservatives Fund group. So they're getting lots of people into office. Basically, consider almost all those Tea Party candidates that are in Congress Koch funded.
Yeah.
If you looked at their FEC records, they'd be Koch funded. And then, somebody like the Zephyr Teachout, who was running against Cuomo as the so-called progressive, who's starting this new progressive movement that's about to explode. This is going to be Soros funded. This isn't going to be like the original populist party that took over the Democratic Party.
Did you see the article that was like, we need 100 Zephyr Teachouts? And they were talking about that sort of the need to do exactly what we are in our own small way attempting to do, which is sort of build a grassroots populist movement. But it's going to be for climate change and for campaign finance reform.
And the light is going to be off of Wall Street. The spotlight's going to be off Wall Street. Yeah, it's going to be on things like climate change and campaign finance reform, which, if you fight for campaign finance reform and climate change in 100 years, is anybody's standard of living going to get any better?
Right.
I don't know.
Just to throw a name out there, let's say you're Alex Jones. He's going to have a harder time focusing on Wall Street as the elite, or even like a Walmart or the Koch brothers or whatever, because he's looking at it and he's not saying, what we really need to do is end free trade and get back these blue-collar factory jobs. And just sociologically, this group of libertarians or patriots or whatever you want to call them, a lot of them do not work in that world. They're either in the tech world or they're...
A lot are unemployed.
Right. I met a guy just out and about who was talking to me about storing silver and in water and all this stuff. You could tell from the guy, this is the kind of guy that should be working in a factory. No offense at all, but just seemed like a regular, bright enough guy, able-bodied, whatever. And instead he was like a freelance commission salesperson for some dumb water filter thing. Right.
And that guy should have a $65,000 a year job working at GM and be able to support a family and benefits.
Yeah, exactly. Just the fact that he now identifies himself as, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm all alone in the world.
Yeah, it's me against the world.
Me against the sheeple. He doesn't self-identify. And I think...
They're not defining the enemy.
It just makes you wonder how much of this stuff that's out there is leading us to a result versus how much of it out there is just a gambit that's just leading us to lose a bunch of energy and to fail.
The foundations right now are funding two false trails. Campaign finance reform is a false trail. That deserves an entire episode to define. The one obvious thing about this climate march is that there were no demands. It was all about marching down this false trail, blowing off steam.
Yeah.
This march was billionaire-funded foundations and Wall Street banks that hired Madison Avenue marketing companies who threw everything they had at this to make it appear grassroots and keep Wall Street out of the line of fire. During that entire march and the next day during the flood Wall Street, no demand was made of Wall Street. They seemed to be marching around in circles looking lost,
right,
looking for an answer. I mean, at least I hope they were looking for an answer. I am not sure that they were even that conscious.
Yeah, exactly.
It was one of the more sad things that I've seen. More sad than Occupy, because this is a few years later, right? And none of the right lessons have been learned, it seems, that you need to organize behind large economic demands of Wall Street.
Right.
I'm not sure if the ruling class set up this march to dump their fossil fuel stocks because it's time to compete with Russia and China.
Yeah.
If this is all about them wanting to go nuclear. But that would speak for a ruling class that's not insane.
Right.
That would be a ruling class determined to continue in power. And I'm not sure that's what we've got. Our ruling class is much more likely to believe their own propaganda. They may sincerely believe this mixture of green and this politically correct agenda. I'm looking right now for indications that this is not the case and that this was all a cover to go nuclear. But you can't assume that yet. You can't assume they're sane.
Right.
The average person, the people that I met when I was in Nebraska, believe that Wall Street are thieves. The Wall Street gang are thieves and should not rule the country. But what do they see when they turn on the television? Are people marching on Wall Street but saying nothing.
Yeah.
I've been reading Machiavelli's discourses, and Machiavelli would define what happened here with the march as the elite are defined by Machiavelli as feudal nobility, then the bankers, who have to be boxed in, or in today's terms regulated, under the control of the popolo, or people, the middle class. Then Machiavelli says there's another group, the plebe, that would be defined as the city mob. These climate marchers couldn't better illustrate what he considered the city mob. The plebe, or the city mob, have made their money supporting the ideology of the feudal nobility. And this is what this green stuff's about. The thing about the plebe, the urban mob, is probably, according to Machiavelli, the most reliably evil. The natural alliance for him is always the feudal nobility who are living in castles with private armies, supported by the urban mob. Anything good, like taxing Wall Street or nationalizing the Fed, is not going to come from the plebe or the city mob. This is the job of the popolo, or the middle class, and sometimes the peasants. So it's our job to organize the middle class or the popolo. That's where we're going to have to go to for help. It's not going to come from the plebe or the city mob.
Yeah.
Real historical help is only going to come from the middle classes and sometimes the peasants. But first we have to go to the giant sleeping American middle class and not the city mob. This city mob has proved twice now, once with Occupy and now with this climate march, to be ineffective at creating change.
People need to basically be able to play devil's advocate a little better when they look at issues like this, even if it's something like, like Nazism. That's always... Have you ever heard the phrase reductio ad Hitlerium, where basically you can just blow up any argument by invoking Hitler? There was a rationalization for...
There was an economic rationalization to bring in the Nazi Party at the time. Right.
So in the same way, today, we can see what the problems are with the theory of global warming, let's say. But we've got certain people on the right wing of the conspiracy movement, let's say, like an Alex Jones, who just blow it completely out of proportion, and anybody who's concerned about global warming is part of some grand socialist plot to destroy the free market. And
it's become a religion on both sides.
Yeah, the anti-global warming religion is
Jews and the Muslims fighting each other.
Right, and who doesn't factor into the equation, of course, is bankers.
So basically, who doesn't factor are bankers and research and development into, well, you always say, like, things that are capable of baseload.
Baseload power basically means, something that can power a city. It can power not only buildings and homes and stuff, but it can also power industrial operations and that kind of thing. It's
power to desalinize the oceans.
Right. You cannot run a steel factory or something like that on
solar and wind.
It's interesting to see that Machiavelli is making this hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it still seems to be an issue. And I think it's about not just class consciousness, but the awareness of the plebe or the urban mob of production, just of how things get made and how society functions. They are not as in touch with that as, say, the middle class or possibly even the peasantry. The people you want on your side are involved in industry and agriculture and, maybe even small business. They're not so much the knowledge workers, let's call them, or these sort of like left-wing activists who are so important in all kinds of activism. People wonder, like, what happened to the anti-war movement? Well, the anti-war movement is a bunch of frivolous left-wingers who don't have real jobs.
They're plebs.
Yeah, they're just completely out of touch with reality by the nature of their function in the world.
That's why I had a much better time, and I called you so excited from the reddest red part of Nebraska, campaigning with our platform, than I did in Napa, because that area was particularly pleb. I mean, what an awful word.
Yeah.
But that's the word he used. Sorry. They were so sure of themselves and so confrontational, so sure of the way the world worked. They had particular ideas on farming and in the wealthier areas. When I went petition at the farmers market, those people were in academia or IT or finance.
Right.
So knowledge workers. They were so sure of all of their ideas about the way the world worked.
Which they all get from Michael Pollan and not from any direct experience.
Not from the farmer at the farmer's market. When I would go up and buy some fruit, I would tell the farmer my platform, and he'd get into a really nice, deep discussion with me about parity.
Mm-hmm.
A woman would flip me off who was a professor.
You got flipped off over parity?
They're not going to pay a parity price for food that isn't organic or GMO-free.
Right.
Why would I support that? And I said, no, it doesn't work that way. You first have to pay a farmer a fair price. Then they can afford to go the other way back. Go back.
Right. I saw a good bumper sticker yesterday when I was driving, and I think it was a quote from Pope Paul VI, which was, if you want peace, work for justice. I think that's kind of the key to this whole thing, is that you've got this group of people that want something. They want war to stop, they want clean food, clean energy, but they don't have any concept of the justice, the economic justice required to make those things possible.
Yeah.
They live in this fantasy world. You can see that among ultra left-wing kind of people. You can see it among ultra right-wing kind of people, like the Tea Partiers and stuff, where they're just sort of out of touch with reality and living in the world of slogans.
You can consider anybody the plebe who are out of touch with reality and have been removed from the source of production. Mm-hmm. That's what he meant by the urban mob. It was the people who were removed from production and what it takes to produce something.
Right.
And what's funny is that he wrote, they can be the most reliably evil, even more than the feudal landowners who live in castles with private armies. Because every once in a while you'll get one of them to change their mind. But the most militant are the urban mob who mirror the ideology that the feudal nobility sends out there. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And you can see it. It's why does other than just population density, why does the climate march take place in the middle of Manhattan as opposed to, like, let's go out to the suburbs and try to rally people?
People in the suburbs would say, why is my child's college so high? Why can't I afford to keep my house? The American middle class are furious at Wall Street. Yeah. Whereas in England, they still think the Queen's kind of an okay woman. Even when you go to the radical, people like Russell Brand saying he got a tattoo of the Queen. Mm-hmm. They still have love in their hearts for the Queen. But the average American does not have that. They're furious at the bankers that are running this country. And they don't have any love for them. But the urban mob still has in their heart, like, I could be friends with some. You go out to a farm, they've got their pitchforks out.
Maybe it's not that they sympathize with or like bankers totally, but it's more that they can be easily steered off course into things like population reduction and renewable energy and all this stuff. Yeah, I wonder if there is part of the conspiracy here is to denigrate the idea of suburban people. You know, people. It's when you look at like hipster culture, or even going all the way back to like the Situationist International. This idea of like, oh, the alienation of modern life. When you look at like Adbusters culture jamming, it's all just like, oh, Pepsi is the embodiment of evil, and consumer culture identified with the suburban middle class. Basically, like that's a dead culture, and these people are all idiots, and they have nothing of value to offer.
Well, the Situationist International and Occupy was the plebe mirroring the views of the feudal landlords, right? So, and what's their whole thing is this green ideology.
Right.
You look at David de Rothschild with his plasticky boat. It's always been green ideology for the ruling class. The population is too high. You have to destroy the middle class.
You know, I'm in the suburban middle class, although maybe the suburban lower class based on my bank account. Coming from a middle class background, and like my own dad was, I've said before, was in the printing industry, and like he was a very educated person. You know, he could assemble a printing press from the ground up. He could, you know what I mean? He had like functional knowledge and abilities, whereas somebody, you know, I could think about someone I know has a really high-paying job in knowledge work, whether it's like an ad agency or whatever. And these kind of people don't, you know, they don't know that apples grow on trees. They're just completely useless except in their limited role as... I don't know if we should just be like busting on everybody that lives in a city or does knowledge work. I'm sure there's plenty of good people there too, but it's just interesting to know, though, that...
It's a demographic that can be manipulated.
Yeah, right. It's just interesting that it's been that way for hundreds of years, and probably for the same reason.
Oh, the ruling class has knowledge of this.
Mm-hmm.
They know that this is the way it works. So that's who they go to target to manipulate. Look at the difference between the strike in Wisconsin, the original strike in Wisconsin, versus Occupy. Wisconsin was the popolo, the middle class, fighting for economic demands, unions, versus Occupy was the city mob, the plebe.
Yep.
Fighting for ideas.
Absolutely. Fascism comes out of the gutter, you know, whether that's the black shirts or the brown shirts or whatever, that's the plebe. That's like this sort of underemployed urban mob who sort of lives in this world of the imagination and can be manipulated into something crazy. Go back and look at pre-Nazi Germany. Like, Hitler was not like a widespread popular phenomenon. He sort of gained power through political intrigue, but his base was these people with all kinds of mystical ideas about race and about blood and soil and all this kind of stuff. But the average person was just like, you know, we just want a good highway system, and we need to get rid of these Versailles reparations and all that kind of stuff. The fascist mass movement doesn't turn to that middle class for their power.
Isn't that interesting?
So what we're saying is, if you live in a city, you're a fascist.
No. How do we phrase one? Isn't that interesting? So if the plebe mirror the feudal landlords, let's call them in this case, for our own reference, the Queen, or the Rothschilds, David de Rothschild, they are suffering with this green ideology and mythology. They're going to take themselves down with this green ideology. China and Russia are moving forward. If we continue down this road, we're moving backward, and we're going to end up destroying ourselves.
You played that clip of John F. Kennedy, and in that speech, the "Ask Not What Your Country Can Do for You," he talks about, you know, exploring the universe and tapping the depths of the ocean and all this kind of stuff. He's basically just describing a forward-looking civilization, or a technologically oriented civilization. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, you know, why is it that the elite or the feudal landlords, let's keep calling them that for now, why do they want to move away from that and toward sustainability and all these kinds of things?
Because they might be insane, because tyrannies crumble from within. They might not be, like I said in the beginning, rational and moving toward nuclear. That's just a hypothesis of mine. If we're lucky, this could be a front to move into high density nuclear fusion. If we're not lucky, this could just be pure insanity. They're ruled by green mythology. We're going backwards, and Russia and China march ahead, and boom, the West is gone.
Well, and you're leaving out the fact that Prince Charles talks to his plants. Just to say, like, are these people insane? They really might be insane. The possibility is that Prince Charles really might be insane, and how many people does that apply to? When they get into this green mythology stuff and eugenics, we've talked about this in previous shows. Eugenics is such an important part of this, just the environment. It might just come down to these are people that don't even know how to flush the toilet by themselves. And so they too live in this just mystical fantasy world where they look around and just think, I want to live in the Garden of Eden and I don't want any other people with me.
Machiavelli says that you can't do anything else but get rid of them.
Right.
Once they've gone insane, they have to be replaced.
Yep. You can't reform
Prince Charles.
Prince Philip, his father, would say that he wants to be reincarnated as a virus to reduce the population. Mm-hmm. The eugenics stuff, we're talking about it's like the feudal landlords. We're talking about the black nobility of Europe, not meaning African American nobility, but the feudal nobility, the sort of black wealth or whatever. Just these sort of anti-human, anti-production, anti-development elites. You look at their history, and eugenics plays a big part in that. This idea of, when you look at Darwin or the Galtons or whatever, it's basically reduce and refine the population as you would with dog breeding or something.
And meanwhile, though, on either side, we have China and Russia marching ahead, bringing in planks of our platform.
Yeah, no, I mean, it just shows that what we're talking about is common sense to people who have their heads screwed on straight.
Our ruling class doesn't have their heads screwed on straight. There's the possibility left that they could be so clever that this is to start competing with energy, with China and Russia's new energy, or they just could be insane, and it's probably the latter.
You can't have rational discourse about these kinds of things because the ground has been so polluted with lies and false trails and misinformation. And so you talked in a previous discussion about how the elite creates myths and the masses believe them. And it's the thing that separates the masses from the elite is the elite knows which are the myths.
Yeah, the elite create mythologies, but the difference between us and the elite is that the elite knows that the mythologies they create are mythologies.
Right.
And that's what you have to train your mind to do. You need to be able to look at the facts.
And sometimes it's hard to figure out, if you look at something like socialism, is socialism a real threat? Was that ever a real goal? Like, you can look at it from one angle and determine that, yes, the goal of the elite is global socialism. But you could look at it from another angle and say that's total baloney. The goal of the elite is just total free trade and capitalism everywhere. So it's kind of like, what's the real answer? You've got to be able to have an open mind and look at who benefits from these different things.
It's the same thing when right now on a smaller level when we're dealing with running these candidates. Talk about creating a mythology around somebody. All of our competition, they create a mythology. Unless you look at the numbers behind the person and the agenda behind the person, there's no way it would be near impossible to see through the mythology they create around that person. A much clearer example I found for people to go to a website like Monsanto. If they're a green activist type, and you say, look at the mythology that somebody like Monsanto is creating. If you go to Monsanto's website right now, it will say, hold on, and the subtitle is a sustainable agriculture company. Then
Right.
You go, and the first image says, what would a meal look like without honeybees? An interactive game with honeybees. So now Monsanto is a friend of the honeybees, right? It says Monsanto is playing a key role in helping farmers address the challenges of water. So now they're pro-water. What you will discover may surprise you. At Monsanto, we're eager to tell you our story. Learn from us, collaborating to improve agriculture. Monsanto is working alongside farmers and partnering organizations to make agriculture more sustainable. So they hit the words sustainable, honeybees, water, right? And so the site is beige with it looks like an organic.
It's all focus group tested. It's basically what are people afraid of with Monsanto? Okay, let's address those things in the ways that that test with the highest comfortability, or for people who haven't like worked in ad agencies and stuff, that's actually how it works. It's like a lot of it is intuition, but then there's also, especially with these bigger companies, we were talking the other day about how Coca-Cola has an entire supermarket that's like a panopticon that's just like rigged up with cameras so that people can shop in the store and their eye movements are tracked. Did they go from Surge to Sprite? Or
This is a really big point. You've worked in ad agencies. I think what makes me the most furious is that they're selling these color protests or color revolutions. They're focus group testing them.
Yeah.
And they're being sold by Madison Avenue.
Yeah, like the climate march that just happened is a perfect example, because it's to people that are not maybe so savvy to that kind of thing. It hits on things that are already in their mind. It feels like it just sprung out of the ether and like responded to something that they're concerned about. They just eat it up, and then to a more sort of discerning mind, you have to pick it apart and see, like, all right, why did they pick this particular theme? Why did they do it the way they did? It's a conspiracy. It's people working together to sort of like influence things in a way that
it's perfect timing. Okay, the Rockefellers. If you go to the New York Times, the Rockefellers are divesting of their fossil fuel investments, and they started that a couple months ago. Bunch of other major players are divesting of their fossil fuels. And is that because Russia and China are focusing on new forms of nuclear? And we don't want to let the British Empire, which includes America, the Anglo-Saxon Western world, fall behind in technology. Are they years ahead of us and saying, well, if Russia and China are going into these new forms of nuclear, we've got to catch up. It's time to short our fossil fuel stocks. So let's create a color revolution on Madison Avenue and make it look like it's spontaneous. And we're just such good guys that we had to divest of fossil fuels, so we need to invest in in these other alternative energies, because they know that's coming. We can't fall behind China and Russia in technology. We don't have enough people.
Yeah. So what's the next trick that's coming? Because it's not like a bunch of billionaires are going to get together and say, let's invest in something that returns no money to us and just gives people.
Who knows? They might even. I never even thought it came down to money necessarily. I feel like it comes down to power. They don't want to fall behind the technology of Russia and China. So I never thought it was necessarily for the bottom lines of a few energy companies. It's about strategic power of the white Western world.
The white devils, I'll add it again.
It's for strategic power of the Anglo-Saxon world. So I don't think that, who knows, we might be getting nuclear. We might be getting nuclear soon. I mean, we might be getting new forms of fusion. You don't know. Because the elite are fighting amongst themselves. And meanwhile, we're just out there marching around, helping them solidify the myth. All of this timing also distracts, though, from war.
Right.
I think this is a major distraction from the war. We're going to war with Syria at the same time we're marching for climate. Why weren't we marching for climate at a strategic moment of peace?
Right.
Why isn't the focus on the war right now and Wall Street?
I have a hard time. I've had a hard time in the last couple of weeks when we've been talking about these issues, just trying to go along with the idea that you've been promoting, that this is not about money, or it's not about sort of cartel control, that it's about power. I just can't quite make sense of what that really means in practice. And like, how
it means
is this?
that the Queen of England has like a $5 billion cart. They cart her around in that gold cart. What is that thing called when it's a cart?
A wheelbarrow?
No, the cage pulled by the horses.
Oh, a carriage.
I saw something that her carriage is.
I wish they had it. They should have a golden wheelbarrow for the queen.
Just wheel her around with her knees up. The carriage is solid gold. That sounds like some sort of disco song.
That just seems excessive, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's solid. Even the wheels.
Yeah.
Okay, they valued that thing, and it was something like $500 million.
Wow.
No, that's the truth. If you look at the Queen's carriage price online, it's like they valued the weight in gold. Okay? I swear to God, it sounds so ridiculous.
What is the point? For some reason I got on a kick the other day, and I didn't. Well, I was looking at there was some Russian oligarch that's under house arrest who's like a major owner of Fabergé eggs, and I was looking that up to see like what the heck is a Fabergé egg? It's just like, why are these billionaires obsessed with a stupid golden egg with like a little picture of a prince that pops out?
Because they have nothing else to do.
This guy had like $10 million worth of Fabergé eggs, or no, maybe it's like 100 million or something crazy.
Because you're psychotic, you start getting into collecting stuff. When somebody gets into collecting material things, it's a sure sign they have no meaning in their life.
The Diamond Jubilee carriage.
The Queen doesn't care about money. She cares about keeping her power.
Right.
Look at all the land she owns. She owns Canada and Australia. And everybody's sitting around like, oh my God, it's about the bottom line of the oil company. No. The Queen sits in the middle of the G20 meetings. Not the guy from Shell.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to keep domination of the planet. They have people like George Soros doing their bidding.
Yeah. Whether it's the Queen or it's George Soros, what is so important about maintaining this position or maintaining your opulent lifestyle? Or if they have,
they think it's a religious calling because they think that they're meant to be rule and it's a duty. They don't sit around thinking, oh, yeah, look at all my stuff. They think of it as an obligation.
Yeah.
They're making a miserable sacrifice for the rest of us, and you should be glad.
It's like at a smaller level, if you looked at like Ayn Rand's books, you look at Anthem or Atlas Shrugged or any of these things, it's the same sort of a message where it's not so much like, oh, yeah, money, cash, boats. It's... You know what I mean? It's like this sort of noble, self-sacrificing hero who also happens to hate everybody around him. But I always want to break things down into basic, practical economics. But just saying, if Russia is deploying limitless, cheap energy, who suffers from that? No, that's great for everybody except for the people who run cartels, the people who... Yeah. Sort of manage the imperial system.
So what do we have? Ta-da! A climate march sponsored by the Queen because we're about to get nuclear too. If Russia and China are moving into new forms of nuclear, this allows us to invest in clean energy, subvert the oil cartels. They planned this climate march for a reason.
I guess it just gets us into the area then. Do the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and George Soros and all these people, do they really run the world? Or is it... hedge fund managers? Is it like the Koch brothers who have like an active interest in?
That's where the rift is. Like that's the shadow war. It would be between the Rothschilds with the guy with his plastiki boat, and the Queen, and her kids are probably talking about environmental stuff. And it's always been this environmental stuff for the British elite. It's
between like the idle rich and the sort of the captains of Wall Street and industry. And, yeah.
But the idle rich are starting the color revolutions. The Koch brothers are doing the Tea Party to get their people in. But yeah, that's less of a color revolution and more of a real revolution in a way. They're getting people into office.
Yeah, it's just complicated because if the Koch brothers do not want cheap, abundant nuclear power. They want Peabody coal and these big natural gas and coal and the oil cartel. You know what I mean? There definitely is a layer of the elite who are like these sort of the people you're going to see in the Fortune 500. Low-level billionaires.
Exactly.
Those people need that gravy train to keep rolling. They are going to lose their money and lose their power if it doesn't.
That could also be why the Koch brothers are scrambling to get people into office, because they know times are changing.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems that with this discussion as if you are sort of sympathizing with, let's call them European aristocrats or something like that.
I'm not, because they make terrible choices, genocidal choices. They should be giving clean, abundant, free energy to Africa, allying in a condominium with Russia and China.
It almost seems... So then let me put it a different way. You've got the top...
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The top layer of the elite, who would be the European aristocrats or whoever... They don't want anything from us. They want us dead.
Yeah.
The lower level of the elite, who would be the Koch brothers, they want us as slaves because they need our labor and they need our money Whereas the European aristocrats are saying, we've got all the money we need. We might need a few peasants and a guy to make Fabergé eggs or something.
It's a war between the idle elite and the productive elite. And then in the middle, you have speculators playing off it all.
Nailed it.
Swish.
Yeah, no, this just blew my fucking mind. You don't think about it in these terms. You think about this sort of... Well, you think about it as a pyramid structure, you know, like all the Illuminati kind of stuff where it's like, oh, the Queen's at the top and then Jay-Z is somewhere in the middle.
Jay-Z's nowhere.
I've heard oligarchy referred to as a slime mold, where it sort of conforms itself around its interests in any given situation. So even though there are, like, people are at odds over certain things, they'll still go with the flow on certain things because they have to.
Mm-hmm.
But it really does seem like there are just different interests between people.
The idle elite want us dead. They also want us as soldiers. Don't forget that. So they are happy to create economic destruction by design. But they want soldiers because America is the military arm of the British Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Middle-class kids don't fight. They have less people in the military than Russia does or China does. But we have better technology. That's the only thing that's ever saved us, is that we have better technology.
Mm-hmm.
But we've always had less military personnel. So they need to keep the numbers of military personnel up. And the only way to do that is create an economic disaster. So there's two different things going on. They're fine with the population of America as long as they're desperate. So they become soldiers. So they fight. Then in Africa and other countries, they want to reduce the population. That's the goal. The only reason we've kept our oil interest this long and our fossil fuel interest this long is so that we have a reason to be in the Middle East. They're learning more and more that people don't need an excuse to be in the Middle East. Oil was the patsy.
Are you saying oil was ever a real reason, or is the reason just basically geostrategic control to keep...
The reason was geostrategic control. They sold it to the public by letting them think it was for oil.
Right.
So they didn't want people in the street marching around saying, the British Empire is trying to get more territory. The British Empire is trying to take more strategic control. But if they walk around with signs that say no blood for oil, we're asses. We're there for oil. We could retool tomorrow, but we're there for oil. It was just a reason for us to be there.
It's kind of interesting when you look at the British play these great games where they ally the sort of number 2 and 3 powers against the number 1 power, or no, they ally number 1 and 3 against number 2. So like in whether it's World War I or World War II, they sort of set up Germany as a bad guy and create an alliance for them, and then over here the US gets to be with Russia. And it's just to kind of like keep this meat grinder going so that nobody can ever challenge imperialism in general. The Koch brothers don't want the Russians to pioneer breeder reactors or something because that screws up their coal monopoly and their cash, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the Queen doesn't want them to do that because then all of a sudden, guess who becomes the ascendant power, and nobody needs the Queen anymore, and no one needs to fight wars anymore. And then it's just what happens to all of these goofy people going to their...
Imagine if a higher standard of living than ours started to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
The West would look archaic.
They couldn't like keep up the illusion, and it would get to the point where even in Britain, people would be saying, "Wait a minute, where's our fusion reactor? Where's our desalination?"
Exactly. They know that Russia and China are about to go into the next century.
Yeah.
Professor Griff would say we're all just pawns in the game.
Yeah. Be prepared either for nuclear energy or nuclear war.
Yes! Are you prepared for nuclear energy or nuclear war?
This radio show is turning into like an NFL broadcast where I'm like Al Michaels and you're the former NFL player who does all the color commentary and acts all wild.
Swish.
The thesis here is that there are sort of two layers of the elite, one of which is idle and one of which is productive. The idle elite already have it made. They just want us all to die, and they don't want any bad examples like Russia or China basically freeing the rest of humanity from their dependence upon the elite. If tomorrow I woke up, no longer had a mortgage, I had free energy, low-cost healthcare, I had a great job, I'd probably have some more kids, to be perfectly honest. Because I like having them, but I just can't afford them. I think that's a big part of it, is like, give that to Africa and the population goes through the roof. And if these people have almost like a religious devotion to...
all population, all day, all the time.
I feel like you can't really explain it in any other way. And so that, well, then
Their religion is population reduction.
the other layer of the elite, though, the Koch brothers and all these guys, I don't think their religion, I don't think you could put it in quite the same terms, because they need a population of people to consume their products and to work for their products, and you know what I mean?
No, I wouldn't assume their religion is population reduction for the Koch brothers. Sorry.
Cash money.
Yeah, their religion is cash money. And I don't know what the religion is for the Koch brothers, but they're getting people into office.
So who's the real enemy here?
Both. It's always the elite. Is it the guy who wants you not to have any more kids? Is it the people who want to prune back the human race? Or is it the people who want your slave labor? It's both.
And maybe the biggest point here is we're not quite sure who the biggest threat is, but the issue is, what are you going to do about it? Because the Koch brothers want you burning coal and working 12 hours a day.
They'd be happy to have child labor.
Queen Elizabeth wants to encrust your skull with diamonds.
What?
Just saying that.
Oh, that art? What's that guy's name?
Damien Hirst. Yeah. Look
Damien
forward
Hirst
to it. We're going to do an interesting show on the issue of modern art. You're being attacked from two sides, so it's, what are you going to do about it? The David Icke route is fight back against the Queen, and let's get 300,000 people in front of Buckingham Palace demanding that the Queen reveal herself as a lizard.
That would be awesome if she did come out and she pulled off the mask and she was like, I am a lizard, now what? Now what? Started getting all gangster. Like, now what? And her tongue's all flipping everywhere. And we're all like, oh, then we don't be even more submissive.
Check like, this out, son. I got eyelids that come from the bottom.
Yeah. And then what would we do?
You'd be like, all right, well, solve that problem.
I know. Next.
You can't fight directly against those oligarchs, because what can you do other than just exposing that they want genocide? And you can't really fight directly against the Koch brothers, meaning like, all right, we're going to support the opposition to the Koch candidate, because then you're just going to support Zephyr Teachout, and that's just coming at it with a different mask. In the political realm, you basically have different cartel candidates fighting against each other to perpetuate the cartels for that sort of like second level of the elite.
The elite just see you as just as air to be moved, like as a fan blows air. You can do something. You can always at every second vote for what's in your best interest and the best interest of your class and humanity, meaning if your brother is sick, you're sick. You should demand a high standard of living for your class.
Mm-hmm. It just comes down to the program of economic reform that we've been talking about this whole time, whether that is, yeah, we do need nuclear power. We need it to be, some public control over it. We need to have a public credit facility to finance all this kind of stuff. On down the line, we need to control Wall Street. It's basically like we need to set the agenda and then figure out how to get it enacted, because we've got the numbers. All they have is propaganda and lies, and yeah.
I'm going to have access to the same information you have. I'm going to have access to the same opportunities, the same education. They can't covet the resources for themselves. That's the thing. You have to demand that you have access to the exact same resources. So, ending suffering immediately of all kinds for animals and humans. Ending suffering tomorrow. But that's what you have to demand for your class. Like what we were talking about on that episode with Webster.
Mm-hmm.
The working class for itself.
Your demand cannot be, it's just me all alone in the universe.
Mm-hmm. Like an info warrior.
Yeah, I'm going to go invest in silver and wait for it to go up to $30 an ounce. Like, what does that do for your kid's future? Unless you strike it rich in silver, I guess.
Or, meaning you can demand stuff. Make demands. Not wait for it to be trickled down to you.
I find it kind of funny how people are... I don't know if you ever read like the Huffington Post or Salon or those kind of magazine websites these days. People are so hostile toward religion. They hate everything about Christianity, unless Pope Francis says something nice about gay people. Then they'll say something nice about him for about 2 seconds. Yet they treat, I don't want to say the state, but they treat things like global warming as a religion, where it's just like an obsession that to question it or to think about it is seen as a heresy.
Yeah. You're a climate change denier, or you're a, what does the right call them?
A socialist.
Yeah. Right, a global socialist.
A globalist.
Yeah.
Everybody is just shrouded by mythology of various kinds, and the point is to keep you fighting the wrong battles and chasing your tail and out in the streets marching around to sort of provide cover for some political agenda. It's
not me. I work every day on trying to be mythology free.
All right. So everybody but you.
I got a weird feeling. I'm starting to believe in something. And then I investigated.
No.
I'm like, no, but you know what I mean? You do the same thing.
Yeah.
You do the same thing. You wake up and you question everything. Even your rice and beans you made today. You were questioning whether it looked like stuff in the garbage disposal. Well, I'm just saying. Maybe we believe in a mythology of the New Deal.
Uh-oh. I know what you mean, but it would be a mythology if it was, we believe in everything Franklin Roosevelt said, period. Because he did a few things that were not that wise, but like we at least believe in the importance of keeping an open mind, trying to identify what the threats and problems are, and coming up with workable solutions to them. I think the biggest problem in all of sort of conspiracy studies, but also in the mainstream, is just you swallow an entire mythology, hook, line, and sinker, and then you react based on that. As that's like your set of a priori assumptions, and then everything else is working off of that. You react to events one at a time based on, well, I'm not a globalist, or I'm not a Koch brother, or I'm not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just sort of like have this enemy image, and then everything can be manipulated to hinge upon that.
Mm-hmm. It was like the conversation I had with a friend of ours. I have it here on my emails. I'm going to read it. I said, what was this protest about? To end capitalism? And he said, to bring attention to the economic struggle, I reckon. There probably were like 300,000 plus people there. I said, 300,000 people doing what? He said, People's Climate March. I said, yes, I know there was a People's Climate March. I'm asking what demands were made. And then he said, point for point, as many people as we can get to stop and take a look, we win. Look at what? He says, extra activists being in New York City. I said, doing what? More activists. I repeated, doing what? He said, talking with people walking by that ask us what's up. He says, how many contacts before an idea sticks? And I said, what is their answer? What idea do they want to stick? He says, it didn't come up. Then he writes, revolution. I say, that's my point. And then he writes, dramatic restructuring of society. I say, how? I said, revolution. Okay, but what's the plan? That didn't come up. He said, I'm tired. Got to go to bed.
Yeah.
And he says, but I have a plan. I said, it's good that you have a plan. What's your plan? And he said, not sure yet.
This is the left-wing answer to the Cliven Bundy militia.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning you get a bunch of people out there who are just like, get your hands off me, New World Order.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, all right, so what are you going to do now that you have a cowboy hat and you've got the land surrounded? What's your next move?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm saying I'm just mimicking. If you just place those guys' answers right in there. I don't know, but why? I don't know. Revolution. Okay.
I guess maybe, and so like maybe the whole point of of this episode, or even what we're doing in this show, is just to sort of shake people up a little bit, to question their own assumptions and start to try to unravel what's really going on in the world. What is your interest? What's the interest of your class? And sort of what are the concrete demands you need to make to secure your own best interests?
Explore the stars together as a human race. Conquer the deserts we were talking about desalination. Irrigate the deserts. All right, how are we going to power a desalination plant? Infinite, abundant, powerful energy. Eradicate disease. Tap the ocean depths. Meanwhile, everybody in the climate march was out there. I'm marching for the oceans. I'm marching for the dolphins. Yeah, I'm marching for the dolphins too. Nobody loves dolphins more than me. Nobody.
I'm gonna go look up a dolphin researcher to bring them on the show to contest that.
And then I'm gonna say, I love dolphins more than you. No, nobody loves dolphins more than me. Let us seek to invoke the wonders of science instead of its terrors.
To go back to the energy issue from before, without explaining exactly how this technology works, this idea of the liquid fluoride thorium reactor, it's basically, right now, a nuclear power plant is, you take a uranium rod and you subject it to fission. It comes apart and it releases energy. That boils water. The water creates steam. The steam drives a turbine, which creates electricity. Liquid fluoride is basically a molten salt solution And so a thorium reactor, instead of doing that in water and boiling the water, uses this. It's almost like an engine coolant almost. It uses thorium, which is so abundant that it can be mined out of like beaches. It can be mined out of any existing mine. It's so abundant that your entire one person's energy supply for an entire year can be mined out of like a 55-gallon drum of common rock.
What's the negative of thorium? Like, you know how there's like, they say there's negative to uranium and plutonium, and it's
nothing at all. It's
like hydrogen.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's very mildly radioactive. Like a lifetime supply of energy for one person is like smaller than a baseball. You can hold it in your hand because it's so weakly radioactive. This is like a common element that's just sitting there in the sand. It's already like thrown away as an industrial waste product. Just to say, like, this was developed in the 1960s under Kennedy's sort of vision of let's just explore everything. Is they went out and said, all right, let's do that. Or like the particle physics industry. I used to do a lot of work at Fermilab, where people might have heard of CERN or the Large Hadron Collider. Fermilab used to be the biggest one. It's got this thing called the Tevatron. But that is like, it's basic scientific research with absolutely no practical application. And from like the 60s until recently, you know, it was pretty well funded. And out of that came the internet and like a lot of different materials and a lot of different even construction processes and stuff, because they have to build big tunnels and see.
But there's spin-offs from all this research and development.
That is what humans are capable of, landing a robot on Mars, yet we're supposed to act like a bunch of chimps and just like live in a yurt.
This is the problem with the climate marchers. I don't want to be scratching in the dirt living in a yurt. I didn't mean to make that rhyme. That was an accident. How do you define what the human race is? I like civilization, and I like improving civilization, not going backwards. We haven't built anything new in 100 years.
Or anything. Yeah, what's the last significant breakthrough other than the internet?
That was created by NASA and DARPA.
Or yeah, parts of it came out of military research, but parts of it did come out of the particle physics industry. And even now, like quantum computing and the grid and all this stuff are coming out of the Large Hadron Collider, because like the computing needs are so massive for them to be able to sort of quantify what's happening in particle collisions, because you've got like a zillion bits of data per second or whatever, so they need to like invent entire new types of computing to be able to keep up with what's going on, you know. So it's just like, to have sort of an arbitrary but objective challenge forces them to do what private industry will never do, because there's no profit motive.
Throw it all at research and development and get it away from speculation.
Or my most recent figure on like the total cost of the U.S. high energy physics industry, if you want to call it that. And this was when like Fermilab was really up and running. It was something like $10 billion a year.
What? We give $85 billion a month to Wall Street to bail out Chase.
We spend $58 billion a year on pet food.
Whoa.
Oh no, sorry, $22 billion on the food. Some of the rest is like veterinary care. We spend twice as much on dog food as we do discovering like the fundamental nature of the universe.
That's a major point you just made. We give $85 billion. You know, people don't even know. Is that how much we give? $85 billion a month to Wall Street and QE?
I think they might be tapering it off, but that's what it has been, yeah.
Was it 70 now or something? Whatever. We're giving 7 times that amount to Wall Street every month?
Every month.
Every month! God.
These guys that are out talking about thorium energy, and keep in mind, again, it's a fail-safe, small-scale reactor technology that could provide like endless, infinite energy for the entire Earth, basically for the rest of the end, until the end of time.
But people can't connect to that. Like they can connect to the dolphins. It's
like the alchemy economy. It's basically you would have so much energy at so little cost that you can do anything you want to do. Everybody in America could afford to put a swimming pool in their house. Everybody could desalinate seawater. You'd never worry about clean water again. I was just thinking about renewables again. Or when you look at, I sort of look at all energy technologies as batteries, where the sun is a battery. The sun has the sun is a big ball of potential energy, and then it turns into whatever usable mechanical energy. Most of quote unquote fossil fuels are basically just they're all hydrocarbons. It's like methane is the simplest hydrocarbon. Methane is just a battery that you break it apart, it releases energy, and then you can use that. And the difference between methane and thorium is that thorium is 80 million times more efficient. So we've got these just incredible, like, magical batteries lying there in the sand, and we're not using them.
It's incredible because we're being held back from using them. That's just so incredible. It's like Kennedy said, conquer the deserts. Just keep saying that to yourself. Conquer the deserts. Imagine if we had nuclear powered desalination on the Pacific coast.
Yeah.
And we could irrigate all that land that's east of LA.
If these elite were really worried about this and like, oh my God, there's not enough water, the first thing they would be saying is, quick, put at least as much as we're putting into dog food into developing fusion energy. Let's double the size of this ITER project. Let's get every national lab working on this.
The more middle class the population gets, the harder it is to control.
And a desperate population is easier to control, which is why the British had imperialism in India and Africa, but they weren't able to overtly run an empire in America because we were a bunch of uppity maniacs with guns that weren't going to take too kindly to that kind of thing.
Now we're not striving anymore. The propaganda I don't like with the climate march is we're the opposite of striving. We're pulling ourselves back.
The propaganda today that you get is all geared towards self-hatred. They want people to hate themselves for consuming resources. They want Americans to hate themselves for, I don't know, Native American suffering, or on and on and on. You sort of have to pick one or the other. Are you going to wallow in self-hatred and in feeling guilty for meager things you do use and need? Or are you going to have optimism about, well, wait a minute, I could get everything I could possibly ever use in my entire lifetime out of something the size of a baseball. I think that's the whole thing about like communitarianism. Like we're all suffering together. We're all hating ourselves. Yeah.
Why can't we all be succeeding together?
Right.
That's the reverse that I'm trying to. That's the script I want to flip.
Yeah.
I mean, the world you want, not your own separate private world on your own commune or your own libertopia. I mean, create the world for all of us that you would like to envision, but for everybody. If you're not creating it for everybody, then you're not doing God's work.
If you're in the climate march, you live in a world of mythology. Your ideas about what's possible in the world are based on somebody else's fairy tale.
Yes.
Whereas in the real objective world, you can gather up a barrel full of sand and power your house for an entire year.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that.
You know what I mean? I hate to keep coming back to that example.
But that's so important. You're living in somebody else's mythology that the world is only going in the down direction when it could be rescued by a barrel of sand.
Yeah, that we're running out of resources, we're running out of land, we're running out of water. It's like the whole universe is just like this big soup of atomic energy. And like all we have to do is use our brains to control that in the way that suits us. Yeah, well, we haven't even quite figured out, back to like the high
Aren't the
energy
Chinese
physics.
like mining the moon or something?
I don't know, like they are now building the world's largest super collider, which is like, all right, let's really figure out what the fundamental nature of the universe is. We don't even know that kind of stuff yet.
You've been listening to United Front Radio at ucy.tv/UFR. Have a blessed evening.